Good morning, everybody. It is Man Coverage. It is January 23rd, 2022. We are Nathan Schmidt, Big Joe, and James P. Bonneville. I feel like we're the Brady Bunch with our little when we were over on the side, it was like the three squares, and I was like looking down at Bobby.
The youngest one in curls.
And I was cracking up. But no, thanks to everybody for tuning in today. It's going to be a great show. Our other co-host, Rico McCoy, is going to be on the recruiting trail for a while. And he is not going to be able to join us for the foreseeable future. But we are going to come into your homes nonetheless and bring you all the latest updates in college football. The season is over. We are into the aftermath of the season and also the build-up to season 2. And as we all know, college football never ends, which is awesome. We have now, not only do we have the recruiting that still goes on, but we also now have this thing called the portal, which seems to lighten up the activity every single day. First off, want to say hello to the guys on my left and below me. Mr. Joe, how you doing today, sir?
Good, sir. How you doing? Looking forward to
good.
Another day of football after a football yesterday in the pros. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about a little college today. Missed the college game since the championship game.
Yeah, it was kind of weird on Saturday with no football, but good games yesterday. James P., how are you doing, buddy?
I'm rocking. I'm looking, we're in the second half, the new season, the recruiting season, and who's going to win the press conferences, because it's all about a build up to August when we start kicking this bad boy off in 2022.
There's no doubt. And we're going to talk a little bit today to begin with about the recruiting situation as it stands and also the transfer portal. And I want to talk about the portal first, because we have seen that the portal can be used to make teams better immediately. Bama, I don't think, would have been in that game, that championship game, without Jamison Williams and without Henry To'oTo'o and, some other guys that they pulled out of there. So we need to talk about the guys that have moved, and we'll highlight, the guys that we think are most important, and also talk about the teams that have done the best. LSU is a team I want to talk about first.
Yeah.
As far as recruiting goes, LSU didn't do that great or hasn't done that great up to this point. I mean, they are, not even in the top, they're top 20. I think they're ranked 20th right now on 247. And, that's not going to get it done. But to our newly found Southern draw boy, Brian Kelly's credit, he has done pretty well on the portal. And he is ranked number 1. LSU is ranked number 1 in the portal. They brought in, highest ranked guys of any team. And, you got to give him credit for that. I mean, that's, I guess, if you're moving ships and going to a, new school and you don't really have time to get your, recruiting set up, the portal's probably the way to go. And James, I want to ask you first. What do you think about Brian Kelly and what he's done with the portal thus far?
Well, I think you got to look at it first and foremost. When he came in and got the job, and recruiting, the signing day didn't go as well as LSU usually expects. And things were taking a little longer than usual. There was probably some grumbling down in Baton Rouge and the Cajun area, wondering what the heck was going on. But this past week, I'm not going to lie, Brian Kelly really stuck it to it. I mean, there are 4 names that really shoot off the board to me, and there's more. McCoy Wingo, he got from Missouri, is going to really help and get back to what he wants to do, that he's done at Cincinnati and Notre Dame and Central Michigan. He's transferred from Missouri to LSU, and really, I mean, he's a high 4-star commit, and a lot of the 24/7 guys like Bud Elliott are very high on him. Another guy, Noah Kane, who literally transferred out of Penn State and really never showed himself. He's an old IMG guy. Didn't have top level speed, was just a good running back. And I think going to LSU is going to give him a fresh perspective, and I think he could really stand out at the running back position. Another name to consider that most people won't talk about, and that is Tremont Shorts. He's a transfer from East Tennessee State, who a lot of scouts really like. They show him as a 3-star, a high 3-star, but I could see him coming right in right away and playing that left guard, right guard position and really help bolster, because you look at what Brian Kelly tries to do. He likes to build the line of scrimmage out on both sides of the ball. He's done that everywhere he's been. And I think this class is going to help further that along. I mean, up until this week, if you had me put a prediction on LSU for next year, they're going to finish dead last in the West. And now I think they can make a bowl game with what they got coming in. I mean, they still have work to do at the quarterback position and especially some depth. But overall, I really like what LSU is doing.
Yeah, Joe, you're a big Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
And, obviously Brian Kelly jumped ship right before the Irish were still in contention for the college football playoff. But these guys move teams all the time. So I'm not going to kill him too much for leaving. I mean, he got a lot of criticism at Notre Dame, and, go try it somewhere else. And I didn't really see him win a national championship there. The last 3 coaches at LSU have won a national championship. What do you think about Brian Kelly's chances, and what do you think about what he's done so far since arriving, besides the accent?
Well, I think both of you guys made great points. First of all, about Brian Kelly and the way he likes to build a team, the fact that getting into the recruiting, because LSU was up in the air most of the year with Coach O, no one knew who was coming in there. They were going to be behind in the high school recruiting world anyway. So the portal does give him a chance to catch up on that talent he was missing out on the recruiting aspect of it. Excuse me. I mean, he does like to build from the line. He does like to build a strong defense. He loves a running game. My biggest problem with Kelly, and this is something I complained about when he was with the Irish, and something that I think it's going to really rear its head down there in the SEC, he kills quarterbacks.
Yeah.
No quarterbacks remain. He brings in high profile recruits, drives them crazy. He ends up taking, a second level quarterback and trying to ride him. He could never get that big time quarterback that he's going to need, especially in the SEC, to compete down there. I mean, Georgia got away with it this year, but you can't have a steady diet in the SEC of not having a top level quarterback.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because LSU's had this problem for years where, I mean, going back to even the Miles era where, how many quarterbacks did they go through with all this hype and all this adulation, and they were a lot of, Mettenberger. I mean, heck, for a while there, they were going after guys like, was it Etling? Danny Etling, the old backup at Purdue. Like, they were going through retreads that couldn't cut it in the Big Ten, and you're absolutely right. You look back at his career at Notre Dame, and he ran through guys. Deshaun Kaiser, who ended up having a little bit of a career in the NFL. I mean, there was that kid that went to Florida State. That's names were
Everett Golston.
That's it. Who's they come in with all this ballyhoo, and he's got to create some stability there. And I think Mike Denbrock's going to be the old OC at Cincinnati. He's got his work cut out for him. And granted, look what he did with Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati. Can he replicate trying to do that and create some stability at the quarterback position?
Yeah, there's no doubt. But, Miles Brennan decided to stay after Johnson left, and he's got some younger guys coming in. So we'll see, how that position shakes out. One move of LSU's that I really did like, actually 2 moves, was one, the defensive lineman McKee Wingo, who they pulled, a former 4-star who was at Missouri last year and really, tore it up in the SEC East. He's on his way to LSU, as well as one of the highest sought after players in the portal this year, which is Miles Frazier. Miles Frazier played at FIU. He was a freshman last year, 6'5", 304. This guy is a mountain of a man, and came from a big-time high school in Texas. So I was kind of shocked that he went to FIU to begin with. Kind of was a little bit raw but ended up proving that, he has the skills to play big-time football, and ended up getting offers from 27 big-time programs and chose LSU over Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, Florida State, which is where a lot of people predicted him to go. So I'm going to give Brian Kelly a little credit for pulling in Miles Frazier, because this guy proved it already on the field as a freshman that he can get it done. And I believe he's only going to get better. So kudos to him with that guy. I think he's going to help the team right away and help that roster out. They also got a 4-star corner out of Arkansas, Greg Brooks Jr., who, is going to be a help immediately in the secondary, because they lost 2 corners. Eli Ricks was one of the top players in the portal, a former 5-star, probably the best player in the portal, in my opinion. And Ricks took off as soon as Orgeron was done, and he knew that the coaching situation was going to be up in the air. Ricks put his name in, and a lot of people were looking at him, and he's going to Alabama. So I think getting that corner was big for him. And they actually got 2 corners from Arkansas. They got both starters from last year from the Razorbacks, Dwight McLaughlin and Greg Brooks Jr. So kudos to Brian Kelly. The other team I think we need to talk about here is out west. We've talked about since Lincoln Riley's getting hired that it's time for a team to hopefully show up out west. And it looks like so far in the portal, USC is winning and Lincoln Riley is winning. He's already got Mario Williams from Oklahoma to come with him. Both the quarterbacks, Jackson Dart as well as Keaton Slovis, are out the door. But we're thinking probably Caleb Williams' is headed that way. What do you think about USC so far, Bonneville, and what do you think about Caleb Williams and his future?
I honestly see him going there. The big question mark I have with SC right now is on their line of scrimmage, which was a real problem under the previous regime. They've got bodies there, but they look like Tarzan and play like Jane. They need to really get back to what Pete Carroll really got through, and really go back to John Robinson during his days in the 80s, where they would dominate on the line of scrimmage. And they knew they had the guys out in the side. I mean, the receiving core, cornerbacks, their D-backs, are outstanding. Heck, they just got in Dye from Oregon. But it's going to be pretty hard to run the ball if you don't have a strong offensive line. And I think Lincoln Riley can do that. I think strength and conditioning is going to be a big key for them, not only going into the 22 season, but in 23 season, if they're going to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. USC struggled. They've gone through a number of coaches, but this was really a home run hire. Do you think if they do end up getting Caleb Williams, as we all anticipate happening, can you see the resurgence of the Trojans?
Oh yeah, and it'll be easier out west than it would be in the SEC for Lincoln Riley, because we all know the Pac-12 right now. Although you have your Oregons, you still have teams like Arizona, Washington State, Arizona State, Colorado to a point that can't seem to get it right anyways. But it was a great point that Bonneville brought it up, because they always have been based on their offensive line. Go back to the student body left, student body right days
Exactly.
in the 70s. The amount of all-pro and Hall of Fame talent that came out of on the offensive line from USC is staggering. And for those coaches to abandon that as a primary building block was sinful, and that's why they suffered. But yeah, of course, Lincoln Riley, once he gets his quarterback, look what he does with every quarterback that comes to him. He makes him into a Heisman Trophy candidate. So I have no problem thinking what he's going to do there.
And Joe, you bring up a really good point. You go back in history at left tackle, specifically at USC. You could go back to the 60s. And if you were a left tackle at SC, it was a guarantee. You were not going to just make it to the NFL. You were going to have a career in the NFL. Guys like Tony Baselli, Ron Gary. Go down the line. What's the guy that played for the Vikings for a while? Ryan Khalil. It's almost like a factory. If you play left tackle at SC, you are going to have you're going to get to that second contract in your NFL career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And hopefully they can booster up the lines, but they're definitely killing it with the skill players. I mean, Mario Williams was a hell of a wide receiver for Oklahoma last year. I think he was just a freshman. And so he's going to have him for several years to go. They got they also got Brendan Rice, who was a 4-star wide receiver that was at Colorado. And then something that happened, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, and that was the running back out of Oregon, Travis Dye. This is a guy that really stepped in when Vardell went down with injury, finished the season with 211 carries, almost 1,300 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 402 yards receiving. This is a little tiny guy that got it done. I mean, he's only about 5'9", maybe. They list him at 198 pounds, but I doubt that strongly.
He looks a lot like LaMichael James. I mean, remember him during. I mean, there's so much similarities between those two guys. It's not even funny.
But I want to ask you both this: is this the philosophy that Lincoln Riley has to learn and change? What we talk about is building the offensive line at certain times, going and playing with the clock. Pounding your offensive line, beating the other team in submission. He had a bunch of skill players at Oklahoma, and he could make it to the tournament, but he couldn't win the tournament. Is that what was missing from his offensive game plan? The ability to pound it out.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, you look at their strength and conditioning, they always had problems at the line of scrimmage. They may have had a player here or there on their offensive line that was a stud, but I mean, it's not like the Bob Stoops days, when like early Bob Stoops throughout the mid 2000s, where they were stacked on their defense and offensive line. I mean, Tommy Harris was a one-man wrecking crew where they would just rush 4, drop 7, and make you beat them. And he's got to strengthen that part of his game up at SC, because let's be honest, the Pac-12, outside of times where Cristobal was there, it was tend to be soft. They didn't focus as much on their weight room in off-season conditioning as they should have, like the SEC, like the Big Ten. And you're spot on that.
Yeah, I mean, defense has also been something that I think has held them back a little bit as far as when Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma. However, the last couple of years, I've got to admit, the defense has gotten better, and I think it was huge for him to be able to bring Alex Grinch, his former defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, along with him to USC. I think that continuity will be a good thing for the Trojan program. And I think, Grinch has proved himself capable as a D coordinator. What do you guys think about that?
I agree. I mean, I've been a fan of Grinch since his days at Washington State. I mean, if you could take a Mike Leach team and have a good defense, you're doing something, because Mike Leach teams, going back to his Texas Tech days, they always struggled, and he really had his calling card that one year. And I want to say that was 16, 17 when he was at Washington State. And from there he went to Ohio State, and now he's at OU. And I think he can do it. Plus, his base is on the West Coast. I think he could recruit better for Lincoln out there too as well. I mean, especially tapping into the modern days, the Mission Viejos, the Long Beach Polys. I mean, they got to wrap those kids up rather than them going to SEC and Big Ten schools.
Well, you also got to tap into what we started talking about. The Hawaiians, bring the Samoans back over, those linemen, those linebackers.
Exactly.
Ray Malaluga, Khalil Matali. I mean, they've had a bunch of those guys in the past, and I agree with you, Joe. I think they need to bring – the recruiting is going to be huge. I mean, he needs to keep the California guys. He needs to keep the Samoans out there. He needs to own the West Coast, because let's be honest, all the best players from California have been going east. And, Ohio State, Alabama, Florida.
Just look at the quarterback position alone. I mean, DJU, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There is so much quarterback talent out there because, I mean, heck, I bet you a lot of them are Steve Clarkston, are being trained by Steve Clarkston and his being a quarterback whisperer. It just, the question is, where does Lincoln Riley go? Does he do what does he do what Pete Carroll used to do, where he taps that quarterback at modern day? Or does he get more adventurous? Because there's a lot of talent in Southern California at quarterback.
There definitely is. And, before we get off of this, I want to go through real quick and just touch on some of these moves that have been made with these higher end players. Some of these guys we've talked about before, but I know some of them we've missed. And I want to get into this just a little bit with you. As far as the guys that have already made their move and have already taken off, one guy that was kind of a big deal and kind of, we've heard a lot about was Billingsley, the tight end out of Alabama. There was a lot of speculation about where he was going to go. And, this is the team that's ranked number, I guess, 6 in the transfer portal rankings, but also has moved up into the top 3 or top 5 in recruiting overall, and that's Texas. And I think that bringing in Billingsley, getting Quinn Ewers, I think, Texas is looking better. Now, I've already heard the talk about how they're going to be ready to win the national championship with these guys, and I'm not really buying into that. But Ewers and Billingsley, both those dudes, pretty impressive that they've been able to get those guys because they're going to need them as they head into the SEC. Joe, what do you think about Texas's job so far with recruiting as well as in the portal?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Sarkisian can recruit. I mean, the guy can bring talent to wherever he goes. He brought it to Washington. He brought it, he brought it wherever he goes. USC now. He's bringing it to Texas. But what does he do with it? I mean, I don't trust him as a game coach. I mean, I think he's a good coordinator. I think he's a great recruiter. I don't know what he'll do with it. So,
yeah,
I agree with Joe on that one. I question that hire to begin with because, I mean, granted, Texas is a very difficult place to coach, where you really got to act as the CEO because you have to balance the needs of the boosters. I mean, plain and simple, you got to make them happy. And, Billingsley is a heck of a talent, but he had off the field issues and practice issues. I mean, Nick Saban never talks about kids. And he would openly talk about Billingsley in press conferences. And hopefully Banks and Sarkisian can work with him on that because the kid's got real talent. But can he harness that talent to take it to the next level? It's just because you got a bunch of guys on your roster doesn't mean you got a team. I mean, you got to win that. You got to win that locker room. And I think Sarkisian's biggest problem is going to be winning that locker room before he wins on the field, because in 2 short years, he better have that offense and defensive line humming, because it's not Big 12 ball anymore. Where you're going to, hit the corners. You got to win the line of scrimmage if you're going to win the SEC.
Yeah, and they had good players last year. I mean, Bijan Robinson's one of the best running backs in college football, and
absolutely,
they had decent quarterback play. I know he kind of kept going back and forth, but I thought both those guys at times showed skills. Now they're both obviously leaving, but Ewers could be the greatest quarterback in the world, but if they can't stop anybody and if they can't be consistent on offense, they're going to be 5-7 again. I did like how in the recruiting side of things, they did hit hard the offensive line. 2 of the top 15 players went to Texas, and both those guys were offensive linemen. There was Devon Campbell out of Arlington, Texas, Bowie High School, 6'3", 310, an interior, probably the best interior offensive lineman out there. He was ranked number 1 at his position. He was recruited by everybody in the country. He's a 5-star player. They got a second 5-star lineman in Kelvin Banks out of Humboldt, Texas, Summer Creek High School's 6'5", 300, really good tackle prospect, the number 2 ranked offensive tackle. So he is, he is hitting the recruiting pretty hard, and it helps having those bucks behind you. I mean, let's make no mistake here. We can blow smoke up, your boy Sarkisian's butt all you want, but a lot of his recruiting success has been behind the dollars and bills that are coming from the NIL money, pulling these kids towards Texas. Don't you think, James?
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. You know, there's a couple other names I think we should talk about. They're not getting as much pub that I think they should. And this is somebody you and I have talked about. And Joe, let me know if you know about this guy. It's a kid named Jared Verse out of University of Albany. I know everybody talks about University of Albany and how they are in the Colonial. Nobody does.
Right.
But this kid really came out of the blue. I mean, he came up out of high school as a 6'4", 200-pound tight end. Redshirted him, and they moved him to D end. And in the spring season, he ripped it up and was first team All Colonial. And then in the fall season, he became an All-American. And this kid isn't, I mean, at first when he announced, there were very few teams that were looking at him. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to go to Syracuse. And then out of the blue, come the beginning of January, the floodgates opened and everybody was in on this kid, from the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and he ended up at Florida State. And this kid still has 4 years of eligibility left because of COVID rules. This kid could become a nightmare and really benefit that Florida State defense as a whole. And another name that I've been kicking around is a kid I've seen play in high school, is a kid named Quinn Carroll. Went to Notre Dame, blew out his ACL his freshman year, and then just since he wasn't on the field, other people passed him on the depth chart just because, they were better while he was hurt. And this kid's got real talent. His dad played for the U. His brother played for Virginia Tech. When I say the U, Minnesota. This kid could play right guard, right tackle, left guard, left tackle. And I could see him easily stepping in and starting right away from Minnesota under Brian Callahan's regime. And we've seen what he did with that offensive line the last few years under PJ Fleck. I mean, it's been a staple of why those running backs are pounding out, no matter if it's their six-string running back, getting 100 yards a game. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, go ahead and give their offensive line credit. I mean, when your boy went down, the hell of the running back, went for 150 yards against Ohio State in the opening weekend.
Through three quarters. Through three quarters.
He goes down with an injury, and I'm like, wow, there goes the Minnesota ground game, and it didn't seem to really matter. I mean, they kept trucking, and I think that's a credit to not only the offensive line, but also the coaches in the offensive line room. And also I want to give their PJ Fleck some credit for his recruiting. I mean, we talked about at length, Bonneville, the number of running backs that they have had there, and how each of those guys has performed when their number's been called.
I mean, they're going to lose some guys this year, like Cam Wiley out of Vegas is now transferring to Liberty. It's strictly to get playing time. But, I mean, you look back, and they lost Kai Thomas, who started from the second half of the year. He's going to go closer to home and go play for KU. But, I mean, you bring back a guy like Bucky Irving, who really is a running back Minnesota's never had. Incredible hips, really good speed. And you combine that with the bowling ball with razor blades and Mohamed Ibrahim. I mean, they're going to be a formidable team. And they're bringing a kid next year I'm really high on. I don't think you're going to see him right away. He is out of Zach Evans out of Rockwell Heath. He's only a 3-star, but I don't understand how this kid's a 3-star. I mean, you look at his film, and this kid literally reminds me a lot of Bucky Irving. This is a kid who I could see starting by his sophomore year and getting 1,000 yards and being talked about for all Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, when you see what PJ Fleck's done with what he started with, I mean, if he starts getting real talent up there, the ceiling is just there's no stopping to the ceiling he can hit because he's a great coach.
I mean, you bring Ciarrocca back. I mean, he was gone to 2021 season. I mean, Daylon Wright and Chris Ottman-Bell are gonna. I mean, hope people if they remember anything from the 19 season, there's gonna be a lot of slants thrown, and those guys are gonna rack up a ton of yards.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, one thing that I wanted to get into with you guys is, we're about a week and a half away here, almost a little under 2 weeks away from the 2022 Senior Bowl. And I've got to be honest with you, I was looking at this roster. This obviously goes down in Mobile every single year. and they've been killing it recently. Jim Nagy is the director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, and he has been pulling in unbelievable talent. In the past, I think some of the bigger name guys have opted out of it and kind of, thumbed their nose at it. But recently, since Jim taken over, they've really, I think, stepped up their game, and they're bringing in some of the biggest players in college football. And I think it's a good idea. I think it's a great place for guys to go and showcase their talent. And I think it's a great way for these guys that maybe are a little bit underrated or from even the smaller schools to highlight their skills. I don't know what you guys think about it, but Joe, I would like to get your opinion on the Senior Bowl and whether or not you think it can help people move into their improve their NFL stock.
This is going to be one of the most intriguing Senior Bowls we've had in recent years, especially at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
You got Willis, you got Sam Howell, you got a few names out there that have to show their wares. Malik Willis is getting a lot of late, talk on the board. I mean, I hear Mel Kiper talking about him, but I looked at his stats, and in the games where Liberty played against big time teams, he was average or below average. I think against Ole Miss, he threw 3 interceptions and no touchdown passes. Yeah. I mean, so he's got to show something. He has a chance to really move up. There are going to be a few pro teams that are looking for their quote unquote franchise quarterback of the future, and he's one of those names that seems to be everybody's good luck charm right now. But he has to show against major talent that he can do it, and I think this is a big showcase for him. Also, I think for Sam Howell out of North Carolina, because I don't think he did himself any favors this year.
Yeah.
Our boy Kenny Pickett, Nate and I talked about this Montevideo a lot. He didn't do himself a favor to showing up at the bowl game and sitting upstairs. Don't show up. So I know he's high on everybody's list for what he did at Pittsburgh, but in my mind, he lost a lot as a competitor for not playing in a game. I don't know what you think about it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think if he played in the bowl game, I think he'd have been a first-round draft pick. The one name on that list that kind of pops out at me quite a bit is Bailey Zapp, out of Western Kentucky. I mean, is he an NFL quarterback or is he merely a system guy?
But isn't he really small? Isn't he like 6'1"? Isn't he like a Baker Mayfield size?
Yeah, he's 6'1". I mean, but it comes down to, what's the guy's name? He's now the Texas Tech OC. He used to be at Western Kentucky, and before that, Houston Baptist. Zach Atley, the new OC there. It's going to be a question, and I could see this really easy if Bailey Zapp doesn't produce. It could actually help out Atley even more. I think it's Atley. I'm drawing a blank right now. He could be that next hot commodity, kind of like Lincoln Riley was when he was at East Carolina before he went to OU, where he just knows that offense can really produce. And if he can get a primetime quarterback coming up through high school, it could really propel him up there. Another name I think you guys should think about is Boye Mafe, D-end out of Minnesota. A lot of people don't know about this kid, but his metrics, like you get him to Indianapolis, it's going to be scary what he's going to produce. I mean, 260-pound D-end who runs a 4.5 40. He's got a 41-inch vertical jump, and he can squat 653 pounds. His stats didn't show it, but he's going to climb up the board just because he's a metric guy. I mean, he's good, but I don't think he's as good as what I think he could potentially be. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, man, I watched some tape on him, and I was pretty impressed. I mean, he's got a good explosion, and I liked what he put on tape this year, and I think he can only help himself at the Senior Bowl. A couple of guys that I've been looking at, and probably, my highlights of the Senior Bowl, guys that I think can really improve their stock, and also who I think are going to show out at practice. Because a lot of people think, who does what in the game? Well, to be honest, in my opinion, what really is the factor of improving your stock in this whole deal is the practices. Because these NFL coaches, these NFL GMs are there all week. The practices are also on TV, on NFL Network all week long. And these guys can really prove how hard they work and how much they can, succeed in a talent-rich environment by dominating in practice all week. And one guy that I want to highlight, there's actually two guys I want to highlight, one on offense, one on defense. And the one on offense that I want to talk about is a kid that was born right here in Knoxville, Tennessee, Darian Kennard, offensive lineman out of Kentucky, 6'5", 345 pounds, actually played high school football in Ohio at St. Ignatius, and was a first-team All-SEC performer at left tackle. This guy started 26 straight games at tackle for Kentucky. We've seen how Kentucky's gotten so much better at football, let's be honest. And it's all started with their offensive line and their ability to run the football. You guys seen any film on this guy? What's your take on Darian?
It's funny you mentioned that. Watching him, if it was black and white, and knowing it's Mike Stoops and he comes from an Iowa tradition, you'd swear to God he played for the Hawkeyes. He just has that Iowa offensive lineman mentality. And you had me at Kentucky. I know this kid. I could see him being, a second or third day pick, but I like him. I like him a lot.
I can't say I've seen him a lot, but I'll tell you one thing. As a New York Giant fan, I hope you're taking a good study on him and what you guys are saying, because we need him.
Yeah, no, I think he's right up there. The top tackles in this draft are Evan Neal out of Alabama and also Charles Cross. The top tackles are Evan Neal, left tackle out of Alabama, and then Charles Cross, left tackle from Mississippi State. But I got to be honest, I think if, those guys are off the board and you need a tackle, I don't care where you're at. If you're picking next and Kennard is there, I say you take him.
Left, absolutely, 100%.
I mean, 100%. He's a huge man, and I think he's shown with his work ethic that he's going to be able to continue to get better as he moves up. My defensive guy, as Joe knows, I'm big on the safeties. Playing safety as I did, I love safeties.
I didn't see that one coming. You're shocking me.
This guy is probably my favorite player that I've watched all year long, and that is Jalen Petrie, the safety out of Baylor. This dude is unbelievable. He's got the stats, he's got the explosion. He's not the biggest guy in the world. We've seen the move to these big, huge safeties recently in the NFL, and this guy is not big by any stretch. I think he's about 6 feet, maybe 200 pounds, but he's the first Baylor player to ever have 2 pick sixes in a season. He was the Big 12 Player of the Year. This guy had 75 tackles, 18 and a half tackles for loss. He just knocked the crap out of that guy. And you'll notice, a lot of his plays are behind the line of scrimmage, and you think 6 foot, 190 pounds, this guy is a coverage guy. Well, he is a coverage guy, but he also can get after the quarterback. He also can make plays in the backfield. You see his ball skills right there. This guy is a complete dude, in my opinion. And if I was needing a safety in this draft, this is the first guy I would take.
You're right. Another name that I'd throw out there too as well, probably not as well known because they went 3-9 this year, is JoJo Domann on Nebraska. That kid was in on every tackle, it seemed like. He was everywhere. And I think he was a highlight. Him and Cam Britt-Taylor, who's also down there, I think are two players that I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot more about before the upcoming draft.
Well, and I think what Nate pointed out before about watching the practices is a big thing because I remember the story of Parcells when he went down there scouting for the Giants, and he finally got a look at Carl Banks, and he was like, he saw him on the first day, and he said, that's our draft choice, and he tried to not let the other coaches just look at him the rest of the week because that's where they pick up on these guys.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing is, these guys are, they're playing against the best of the best. And that's why, watching practice is so huge because, you make one good play in a game, that's great, but can you do it over and over and over again? And that's the big thing about these practices is you're going to have multiple reps going against guys that have, dominated at the college level. So if you can prove that you can do it day in, day out against the best players in the country, that's where you can really improve your stock. And
especially those small school kids.
Guys.
Those small school kids especially, 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
And they
And
see the raw
another guy
talent they
that I
can work
want to
with.
name is a dude that came out of Florida State. And Bonneville, I'd love to get your opinion if you know anything about this guy. Is Jermaine Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Had a hell of a season. I believe he played at Georgia initially, and he transferred down to Florida State. And was a guy that kind of flew under the radar because, let's be honest, Florida State kind of sucked. But this dude made plays all year long, and I think he can seriously help his draft stock if he plays well this weekend.
He's a kid that came out of Eden Prairie High School, which, if you don't know, Eden Prairie is coached by Mike Grant, Bud Grant's son. This kid gets after it. He's got a quick twitch. Spent a year at Independence, or a year or two at Independence Community College, the one that was on that Netflix show. They didn't talk about him very much at all, but, I mean, he was a terrorist in the backfield. Went to Georgia, was splitting time at D end, and basically decided to transfer out and go to Florida State. And I think he was first team all SEC. I know he was first team all ACC. I think he was defensive player of the year in the ACC. And I think he's top 15 pick. I think this kid's got real potential. He's just got to play within himself and find a system that suits him. And I mean, in all honesty, if you go back to the old school 3-4 Pittsburgh teams, he fits that TJ Watt role really well. That monster back where like we were talking before about James Harrison and Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green. He can completely fit that role really well and get after it in the backfield.
Yeah, you're actually right. He was named the Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC, and I had forgotten about that. But this is a guy, as you mentioned, from Eden Prairie, transferred from Georgia, and man, did he make a smart move. You think, wow, he missed out on the national championship. Well, he was also buried on the depth chart a little bit and wasn't getting as much reps, but he moves straight over to Florida State, is a day one starter, tallies 70 tackles, led the ACC with 18 tackles for loss, and had 12 sacks. This is a dude who I think is going to dominate from day one in the NFL, and I think he has possibly worked himself into a first-round grade.
Yeah.
If you can get back after the quarterback in the NFL, that's what they need right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And, everybody's looking for pass rushers, and this is a dude who's proven that he can get it done. He's obviously got a lot on his resume, but, moving, you talk about the portal, moving to Florida State and getting on the field, was the best move this guy could potentially do for himself. And I've got to give him credit. It was kind of like going from Georgia to Florida State. What are you doing? But it ended up working out really well for him. And I think he's on his way to having success in the NFL.
I mean, Nate, you and I have talked about that many times, about the guys who go to these, get, warehoused at these big programs and never get a chance to show their stuff. I mean, it's great to go and be on the, be wearing the Alabama uniform, but if you never get in the field and no one sees you, you're a mannequin.
Yeah.
So now you got to go where you're going to play. When I used to cover a lot of high school sports up here, if a kid or a family would ask me about things, I would always tell them, if the kid wants to play, because it's going to be a big dedication of his time, and secondly, go where you're going to be on the field.
Yeah.
So
that's the one thing the transfer portal has done is if feel that they're going to be buried on the depth chart, they're going to places where they're going to get catches and they're going to get balls and playing time. You're right, Joe.
I know a lot of it's up to the players, but I mean, we all know the game of the recruiting. I mean, they come into your dining room and they leave your house and they go, across town to somebody else and promise to him the same time he promised you. So it's all a game too.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, he was going to get to play at Georgia, but was he going to be a starter who was on the field the entire time? Definitely not. And that's why, going to Florida State was the best thing for Jermaine Johnson. And he took his opportunity and just blew it up. I mean, 70 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 12 sacks. Those are huge numbers. And it's a guy that, in my opinion, continued to get better, not only in his college career, but even this year as the season rolled along. So we'll see. We're going to talk a lot about the Senior Bowl in the next upcoming weeks. Those are just the guys that we're highlighting right now, but we're going to get into the position battles and who we think is excelling, improving their stock as they get closer to the draft. But I did want to hit on, as we're coming up on the hour here, I wanted to talk a little bit about coaching. As we know, in college football, coaching is what, runs everything. If you don't have that CEO, you don't have that coach, you're just not going to do it. And that's why USC doled out all those, $12 million to bring Lincoln Riley in, and bought him a plane and bought him a house and paid for his house, and Boomer Sooner land. They know they need the guy, they need the coach. And, Clay Helton wasn't getting it done, so they made the move. And, some of these other teams are continuing to make moves. And one move that I want to talk about real quick and get both your guys' feedback on is it was announced yesterday that Auburn had basically fired Derek Mason. They said that he resigned, but in my opinion, it kind of sounded to me like he got fired. And defense wasn't their problem this year, in my opinion. I like Derek Mason. I watched that Alabama game a couple of times just to look at a couple of players, and that Auburn defense dominated. I'll ask you first, James. What did you think about hearing that Derek Mason's gone at Auburn?
It kind of shocked me. I got the feeling more and more it was kind of a mutual decision, and I keep hearing his name being connected to the open DC position at Oklahoma State, which, I think could become a good fit with him working with the mullet. And that is it out there yet that they were talking about hiring internally at Auburn on the DC position? There was a name that was getting kicked around, and I wasn't sure if that was completely out there yet. Has that been released at all or not?
Yeah, Jeff Schmedding, their linebacker coach, has been promoted to the defensive coordinator. And to be honest with you, I don't know a ton about Jeff.
I don't either.
I know he was their linebacker coach, and I know that he's had some success, but he's a relatively young guy, and I just don't know a ton about him. And if you're asking me who I would rather have running my defense, Jeff Schmedding or Derek Mason, it's Derek Mason in my opinion.
It could have been a comfort level position too as well, because I'm just looking through Schmedding's bio. He was the DC with Harsin at Boise State, but honestly, I don't know much about this guy at all. It was kind of a shock seeing this happen. So,
no.
Well, I mean,
what did you think, Joe? I don't know. What do you think about Derek Mason? Have you you like him or what?
I hate to be the conspiracy theorist here, but I mean, when you're sitting at Auburn and Alabama continually is great, and then you have the Bo Nix failure there and a lot of other stuff going on, sometimes somebody has to fall on his sword for the head coach. It's like I hate to say it, but it's like in baseball, the first thing you do is fire the hitting coach or the pitching coach. I mean, they haven't moved up into Alabama's stratosphere again. They are not consistently great. I mean, since the Cam Newton days, how many days have they been great?
No, that's a good point. I mean, it seems like every year, Auburn doesn't overtake Bama, and then they make moves in their coaching staff. I mean, they fired Gene Chizik a year after he won the national championship. I mean, they did have a horrible season, but hell, the guy won the title. And then Gus Malzahn takes over. They love Gus. He was the offensive coordinator when they won. Everybody gave Gus all the credit. And then they fire his ass as well after, having some pretty good years, in my opinion. And, they get rid of him. And so they bring in this guy from Boise State, and then things don't go as planned. So now they're firing Derek Mason, who's proven that he knows what he's doing on defense. It's just kind of like, you have to fire coaches every year. It's like Tennessee down there almost.
Well, it's like you're dealing with boosters. They want the explanation at the end of the year. What happened? Why aren't we competing with Alabama? Why is LSU overtaking us? Georgia won the national championships this year. Where have you guys been? We're putting the money in this program, and it's only going to get worse with the money money they're going to throw in.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a lot more of these type of moves for head coaches trying to save their jobs.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, I think a program that we want to talk about just for a moment here is also, out on the island, and that is Hawaii. Hawaii really hasn't made much of an impact in college football since June Jones was there and was running that high-powered run and gun, run and shoot offense with Timmy Chang and Colt Brennan and all those guys. Devon Best, Greg Salas, Ashley Lally. We all know these names. They were scoring 40, 50 points a game and were really fun to watch. And, the program's fallen on hard times. They're having issues with funding. They're having issues in their athletic department. And so it was rumored that potentially they were talking about bringing June Jones back. And he had thrown his name out there. I think he's 89 years old today. I could have seen a potential return to the Big Island for him. And then it comes out that he interviewed for the job, and they basically told him they were only going to offer him a 2-year deal, and we're going to pick his staff for him. And June smartly walked out of the meeting immediately and took off. And I just want to get your guys' opinion on what's going on out there. Apparently they have hired Timmy Chang, who's never been a head coach before, and they're going to roll their dice with that. Joe, what do you think about Hawaii football, and do you think Timmy Chang can do anything?
I think you have a big problem trying to establish that as a big program because, first of all, you're getting kids to go to Hawaii, which sounds like a great gig and get them over there. But how many of their families can go over there to see them play? And so the family can't go to see them. The game's going to be on in the middle of the night. If you're a big time athlete, why do you want to go there? Your family's going to say, don't go there because we'll never get to see you play. We'll never get to go out and we'll never go to a real game unless one of their boosters suddenly gives us money and buys us a house or something like that. I just think it's a tough place to establish to bring big time recruits into. And on top of that, you're trying to keep, like we talked about earlier in the program, the guys there home, and they want to get off the island. So I just think it's a place that's a real place, a hard place to build a program.
My godson actually played there. He transferred out this year, graduated and transferred out. So he came under Rolo and then stayed under Graham, and things got bad under Graham. I mean, players just didn't want to be there anymore because they were sick and tired of being threatened. And, it comes down to culture. And I think Todd Graham was a big name, but he had a 1980s coaching mentality, and that just it's not going to work. Can they be a national power? No. What June Jones did there with Cole Brennan was next to impossible. But can they be a consistent winner in the Mountain West? I believe they can. It's tough to play out there. Their fan base is rabid. It's a very big football culture. And the recruiting budget's small. I mean, it's where you're seeing some schools have millions upon millions of dollars to bring kids in. They're working at the hundreds of thousands. And I'm talking low hundreds of thousands to get kids in. And
so that's good. How do you get those kids to come out over there? I mean, this is good. You have a good personal. Your godson. I mean, how did his family feel about him going there, knowing that they really only are going to be able to see him in Colorado, or when he comes to the United or the continental United States?
Literally, they went to one road game a year, or one game in Hawaii a year, and they would probably hit 2-3 games on the States otherwise. They really believed in Coach Rolo's culture.
Okay. That
was really the driving force. And I honestly thought for a while there, when Graham stepped down, that Rolo was going to be the guy they went back to. Now, it made a lot of sense with June Jones, but whoever hires the job, this is not a 2-year fix. This is a 5-year fix, because I think Coach Graham really damaged the culture and fabric of that team, and it's going to take years. And they still got to build a stadium yet. I mean, They're still playing on that track where they have 3,000 fans.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
basically playing in a high school stadium, and that's what June Jones said too. He's like, half the teams transferred out. He's like, you're offering me a 2-year contract on a 5-year fix. He's like, how the hell am I going to go into a kid's house and convince him to come to the island if I'm only going to be here for 2 years guaranteed? I mean, that's just not going to happen. And, we'll see what Timmy can do. I mean, let's be honest, Timmy had an amazing career.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he was one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history and one of the all-time leading passers. But, he has never been a head coach before. He's earned his stripes, I believe. He coached at SMU as a graduate assistant. He was offensive coordinator at Jackson State. Emory and Henry. He was the wide receivers coach at Nevada. And then, that's where he's been the last 3 or 4 years. He's kind of been the wide receivers coach or the tight ends coach at Nevada, who's pretty decent offensively. But, this is a whole new ball game for him. And being a head coach is completely different than being a position coach in major college football. And with all the issues going on out there, I think it might be a little bit too much for him to take on.
You know something, though? I think there's one thing not being brought up by this. It just kind of popped in my head. The OC at Nevada, who's now the OC at Colorado State, is Matt Mumme. You remember his dad, Hal Mumme, who invented the air raid. And call me crazy, but I guarantee you that he glommed on a lot in taking, a combination of what June Jones did in Air Coryell and combine the air raid, and you could see something pretty interesting. I think the hiring of the OC is going to be mission critical on that job. Yeah. And you're going to find some of those kids, those JUCO level kids in California and Arizona, high school kids, they could build something, but it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take some time, and heck, find one of those quarterbacks to come back home. And
that's how they did it with Colt Brennan. He had the sexual assault allegations when he was at USC, basically got kicked out of school, was later proved to be innocent, and ended up latching on in Hawaii. And this is what I think could be Timmy's saving grace is the portal. I mean, if he can find kids that need a place to go and want to be part of a high octane offense, he needs to get the quarterback first, obviously. But if he can do that, and if he can get some wide receivers, some under the radar type players that can bust out, he could make things interesting. But it's going to be a tall task for someone who's never been a head coach before. And it's always my opinion that you never really know what someone's going to do as a head coach until they get there, because there's just really no way to measure how somebody can handle that type of position.
Agreed completely. So, switching topics slightly on coordinator hires that I think are going to be pretty interesting to watch. I mean, we talk about Zach Kitely on other shows at Texas Tech, and we brought up Matt Mumme at Nevada. But a name that's kind of a retread that I've always been hot on is Teddy Roof, who's going to Oklahoma. I mean, you look back at his career. Yeah, was he a good head coach? No. But, I mean, his time at, Georgia Tech, Minnesota, Auburn, where he won a national championship, UCF, Penn State. I mean, if Oklahoma can get – I think Teddy Roof can get Oklahoma back defensively to what they once were, because it's all about attacking the quarterback. It's all about getting behind the line of scrimmage and creating havoc. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on Teddy Roof at OU?
I think it's a great idea. That's what they need is defense there. They're going to have a defense to go into the SEC.
Yeah.
And why not start now? Start building it.
Yeah, and the good news is they've got Venables, there, who obviously knows how to run a defense. So my question would be, Joe, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. How much does he hand over the defense to him? Because I think that's going to be important for him to have success as a head coach. You've got to kind of give up, in my opinion, you've got to kind of give up that coordinator role and become the head guy. Don't you think?
I totally agree with you. I think that's when the big problem. When I look at most of the head coaches, it's hard for a head coach to be able to do both the dual role. I mean, some get away with it at the pro level. Andy Reid gets away with it, but for the most part, you're supposed to be the CEO over seeing the whole operation. You got more important things to do during the game than figuring out what I'm going to call the next play. You got to be running the game. Am I going to challenge? Who? What are we going to do on 4th and 1? So you got to be able to give that up, and he's got to. If you can't trust the coaches you're bringing in, then you're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and breaking news on our show. I love doing breaking news on our show. We just got word.
You're not going to do the CNN. Dun, dun, dun.
4-star running back Trevante Citizen out of Lake Charles College Prep High School in Lake Charles, Louisiana, has committed to Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. So he's staying home, 6 foot 217, number 8 rated running back in the country. This guy looks to be a pretty good ball player, and he was being recruited hard by Cadillac Williams at Auburn. Also had offers from Texas A&M, Miami. Those were his top choices, and looks like he's going to stay home in LSU. And Brian Kelly starting to make some moves, man. I'm kind of impressed with what he's doing so far with the portal, and now looks like he's being able to bring some kids home in the recruiting match.
It's an attractive place, attractive job. He is the all-time winning coach in Notre Dame history. The only thing he doesn't have is the hardware. But other than that, he's got everything else on his resume to make people go there. He's won everywhere he went, so it shouldn't be that hard to sell.
No, he is a winning coach, so we'll see what happens. The SEC is a little bit different than playing Navy and Ball State in Notre Dame Stadium, but we'll see how he does. I mean, he's going to have to battle it out every weekend because, let's be honest, the SEC West is a juggernaut, and Bama is not going anywhere. Ole Miss is getting better. You've still got Leach at Mississippi State. You've got Texas A&M, who is the number 1 team in the country in recruiting right now, and Jimbo Fisher everything he seems to be touching is turning to gold. So, Brian Kelly's going to have his work cut out for him, but it looks like he's at least getting it done in the transfer portal and the recruiting world as well. So regardless of that, we're going to wrap it up, boys. I appreciate both of you today. This is a great show here on Man Coverage. We're going to do it again next weekend, same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you guys both for your insights, and I wish you a Merry Sunday.
And let's see if the games today can match the games of yesterday, at least in a drama. They weren't the prettiest games, but coming down to field goals at the end was fun to watch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had the Titans and we had the Packers.
Hey, Bonneville, before you go, I mean, like I was saying to Nate before we came on the air, when you think about it, the NFC, you got Aaron Rodgers, who may or may not retire. You got Brady, who now is saying if he wins, may or may not retire. They just lost Drew Brees. And then you look over the AFC, and you got Mahomes, you got Josh Allen, you got Joe Burrows, all under the age of 26 in vying for a championship this year. Well, let's say about the state of those two leagues.
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree. I mean, it's a youth movement, and I think you're going to see a shift of power over to the AFC. Now, I mean, the big question is going to be, and look at last year's Super Bowl. I mean, Tampa Bay didn't win on offense last year. That defense was lights out. I mean, and you could definitely tell the game earlier in the season when Tyreek Hill did the whole peace sign to Antoine Winfield Jr. He took that to heart. I mean, I saw that kid play quite a bit of football up here at the U. And he definitely has an edge to his game. I mean, it's going to be an interesting playoffs to say the least. If I'm a betting man right now, I got to say San Francisco and the Bengals in the Super Bowl. And man, we haven't seen that since the '80s twice. So that'd be interesting to see that Super Bowl.
Hey,
I mean,
you got to give credit to Shanahan up there. I mean, he
absolutely
hell of a game plan yesterday. I mean, You looked at the game, and I was sitting there watching it. I'm like, it's pouring down snow. The Packers are up 10-3, but I was like, it feels like they should be up like 30-3 because the Niners have done absolutely nothing on offense, and it's been the game. The first half was dominated by the Packers, but he came back in the second half and really made it happen. And I think Shanahan doesn't even get the credit that he deserves.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. The Niners were running 2 plays practically the second half.
Yeah.
And they're literally running on, I would see them come to the line of scrimmage. I'm like, all right, they're going to run a sweep to the left-hand side. All right, they're going to run a sweep to the right-hand side. They would go 4 wide. Okay. They're going to clear the linebackers out. Safeties are going to back up, and they're going to run a slant to the middle of the field. And it was always there every single time in the second half. And I don't know how the Packers didn't pick up on that, because I'm sitting at home watching it and I'm pre-predicting like 20 plays in a row. I mean, it shocked me watching that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Well, as long as Brady doesn't win, I'm good. So I don't really care who wins, as long as it's not Brady. Joe Burrow, I'm not a big fan of his, but if he wins, great. Jimmy G, don't care. Pat Mahomes, another one.
Joe
I don't
Burrow
give
was
a
in
crap.
Ohio for a spell. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
He's an Ohio boy too.
He's a traitor.
I could see the reason why you don't like Tom Brady, because he went to the school up north. I mean, I can completely get it.
Yeah,
exactly. You got to give an excuse. Urban chose Dwayne over him. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Sit behind him?
Yeah, he should have waited his turn and played at the best university in the world. Instead of
I'm surprised when you bring up Tom Brady, you don't bring up Drew Henson's backup quarterback at Michigan. I mean,
Brian Greasy's.
Brian Greasy. Oh yes, Brian Greasy.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, anyways, I hope it's a fun day of football. I don't really care who wins, so that makes it even more fun because I won't get crushed if any team loses. But I would love to see the Buccaneers lose because I hate TB12. So, enjoy the games. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Got some good information today. I enjoyed talking about what's been going on, all the changes in the college football landscape, and we will continue to do this as we move forward in the offseason.
You got it.
Have a good day, everybody.
All right, adios, boys.